Driven to Win presents Anne of the Island by Ella Montgomery. Chapters 5 and 6. Anne's college life deepens with new surprises, heartfelt letters, and moments that shape her future. Let's begin. Chapter 5. Letters from Home. For the next 3 weeks, Anne and Priscilla continued to feel as strangers in a strange land. Then, suddenly, everything seemed to fall into focus. Redmond, professors, classes, students, studies, social doings. Life became homogeneous again, instead of being made up of detached fragments. The freshmen, instead of being a collection of unrelated individuals, found themselves a class with a class spirit, a class yell, class interests, class antipathies, and class ambitions. They won the day in the annual arts rush against the sophomores and thereby gained the respect of all the classes, and an enormous confidence-giving opinion of themselves. For 3 years the sophomores had won in the rush. That the victory of this year perched upon the freshmen's banner was attributed to the strategic generalship of Gilbert Blythe, who marshaled the campaign and originated certain new tactics which demoralized the sophs and swept the freshmen to triumph. As a reward of merit, he was elected president of the freshman class, a position of honor and responsibility from a fresh point of view, at least coveted by many. He was also invited to join the Lambs Redmondees for Lambda Theta, a compliment rarely paid to a freshman. As a preparatory initiation ordeal, he had to parade the principal business streets of Kingsport for a whole day wearing a sunbonnet and a voluminous kitchen apron of gaudily flowered calico. This he did cheerfully, doffing his sunbonnet with courtly grace when he met ladies of his acquaintance. Charlie Sloane, who had not been asked to join the Lambs, told Anne he did not see how Blythe could do it, and he, for his part, could never humiliate himself so. "Fancy Charlie Sloane in a calico apron and a sunbonnet," giggled Priscilla. "He'd look exactly like his old grandmother Sloane." Gilbert now looked as much like a man in them as in his own proper habiliments. Anne and Priscilla found themselves in the thick of the social life of Redmond. That this came about so speedily was due in great measure to Philippa Gordon. Philippa was the daughter of a rich and well-known man, and belonged to an old and exclusive Bluenose family. This, combined with her beauty and a charm acknowledged by all who met her, promptly opened the gates of all cliques, clubs, and classes in Redmond to her. And where she went, Anne and Priscilla went too. Phil adored Anne and Priscilla, especially Anne. She was a loyal little soul, crystal-free from any form of snobbishness. "Love me, love my friends" seemed to be her unconscious motto. Without effort, she took them with her into her ever-widening circle of acquaintanceship, and the two Avonlea girls found their social pathway at Redmond made very easy and pleasant. For them, to the envy and wonderment of the other Freshettes, who, lacking Philippa's sponsorship, were doomed to remain rather on the fringe of things during their first college year. To Anne and Priscilla, with their more serious views of life, Phil remained the amusing, lovable baby she had seemed on their first meeting. Yet, as she said herself, she had heaps of brains. When or where she found time to study was a mystery, for she seemed always in demand for some kind of fun, and her home evenings were crowded with callers. She had all the beaux that heart could desire for 9/10 of the freshmen, and a big fraction of all the other classes were rivals for her smiles. She was naively delighted over this, and gleefully recounted each new conquest to Anne and Priscilla, with comments that might have made the unlucky lovers' ears burn fiercely. "Alec and Alonzo don't seem to have any serious rival yet," remarked Anne teasingly. "Not one," agreed Philippa. "I write them both every week and tell them all about my young men here. I'm sure it must amuse them. But of course the one I like best I can't get. Gilbert Blythe won't take any notice of me, except to look at me as if I were a nice little kitten he'd like to pat. Too well, I know the reason. I owe you a grudge, Queen Anne. I really ought to hate you, and instead I love you madly, and I'm miserable if I don't see you every day. You're different from any girl I ever knew before. When you look at me in a certain way, I feel what an insignificant, frivolous little beast I am, and I long to be better and wiser and stronger, and then I make good resolutions. But the first nice-looking manny who comes my way knocks them all out of my head. Isn't college life magnificent? It's so funny to think I hated it that first day. But if I hadn't, I might never got really acquainted with you. And please tell me over again that you like me a little bit. I yearn to hear it. I like you a big bit, and I think you're a dear, sweet, adorable, velvety, clawless little kitten, laughed Anne. But I don't see when you ever get time to learn your lessons. Phil must have found time, for she held her own in every class of her year. Even the grumpy old professor of mathematics, who detested co-eds and had bitterly opposed their admission to Redmond, couldn't floor her. She led the Frichettes everywhere, except in English, wherein Shirley left her far behind. Anne herself found the studies of her freshman year very easy, thanks in great part to the steady work she and Gilbert had put in during those 2 past years in Avonlea. This left her more time for a social life, which she thoroughly enjoyed. But never for a moment did she forget Avonlea and the friends there. To her, the happiest moments in each week were those in which letters came from home. It was not until she had got her first letters that she began to think she could ever like Kingsport or feel at home there. Before they came, Avonlea had seemed thousands of miles away. Those letters brought it near and linked the old life to the new so closely that they began to seem one and the same. Instead of 2 hopelessly segregated existences, the first batch contained 6 letters from Jane Andrews, Ruby Gillis, Diana Barry, Marilla, Mrs. Lind and Davy. Jane's was a copperplate production, with every T nicely crossed and every I precisely dotted, and not an interesting sentence in it. She never mentioned the school, concerning which Anne was avid to hear. She never answered one of the questions Anne had asked in her letter. But she told Anne how many yards of lace she had recently crocheted, and the kind of weather they were having in Avonlea, and how she intended to have her new dress made, and the way she felt when her head ached. Ruby Gillis wrote a gushing epistle, deploring Anne's absence, assuring her she was horribly missed in everything, asking what the Redmond fellows were like, and filling the rest with accounts of her own harrowing experiences with her numerous admirers. It was a silly, harmless letter, and Anne would have laughed over it had it not been for the postscript. Gilbert seems to be enjoying Redmond, judging from his letters, wrote Ruby. I don't think Charlie is so stuck on it. So Gilbert was writing to Ruby. Very well. He had a perfect right to, of course. Only, and did not know that Ruby had written the first letter and that Gilbert had answered it from mere courtesy. She tossed Ruby's letter aside contemptuously. But it took all Diana's breezy, newsy, delightful epistle to banish the sting of Ruby's postscript. Diana's letter contained a little too much Fred, but was otherwise crowded and crossed with items of interest, and Anne almost felt herself back in Avonlea while reading it. Marilla's was a rather prim and colorless epistle, severely innocent of gossip or emotion. Yet somehow it conveyed to Anne a whiff of the wholesome, simple life at Green Gables, with its savor of ancient peace, and the steadfast, abiding love that was there for her. Mrs. Lindy's letter was full of church news. Having broken up housekeeping, Mrs. Lind had more time than ever to devote to church affairs, and had flung herself into them heart and soul. She was at present much worked up over the poor supplies they were having in the vacant Avonlea pulpit. I don't believe any but fools enter the ministry nowadays, she wrote bitterly. Such candidates as they have sent us, and such stuff as they preach. Half of it ain't true, and what's worse, it ain't sound doctrine. The one we have now is the worst of the lot. He mostly takes a text and preaches about something else. And he says he doesn't believe all the heathen will be eternally lost. The idea, if they won't, all the money we've been giving to foreign missions will be clean wasted, that's what. Last Sunday night he announced that next Sunday he'd preach on the axe head that swam. I think he'd better confine himself to the Bible and leave sensational subjects alone. Things have come to a pretty pass if a minister can't find enough in Holy Writ to preach about. That's what. What church do you attend, Anne? I hope you go regularly. People are apt to get so careless about church going away from home, and I understand college students are great sinners in this respect. I'm told many of them actually study their lessons on Sunday. I hope you'll never sink that low, Anne. Remember how you were brought up, and be very careful what friends you make. You never know what sort of creatures are in them colleges. Outwardly, they may be as whited sepulchres, and inwardly as ravening wolves, that's what. You'd better. Not have anything to say to any young man who isn't from the island. I forgot to tell you what happened the day the minister called here. It was the funniest thing I ever saw. I said to Marilla, if Anne had been here, wouldn't she have had a laugh? Even Marilla laughed. You know, he's a very short, fat little man with bow legs. Well, that old pig of Mr. Harrison's, the big, tall one, had wandered over here that day again and broke into the yard. And it got into the back porch unbeknownst to us, and it was there when the minister appeared in the doorway. It made one wild bolt to get out, but there was nowhere to bolt to except between them bow legs. So there it went, and being as it was so big and the minister so little, it took him clean off his feet and carried him away. His hat went one way and his cane another, just as Marilla and I got to the door. I'll never forget the look of him. And that poor pig was near scared to death. I'll never be able to read that account in the Bible of the swine that rushed madly down the steep place into the sea without seeing Mr. Harrison's pig careering down the hill with that minister. I guess the pig thought he had the old boy on his back instead of inside of him. I was thankful the twins weren't about. It wouldn't have been the right thing for them to have seen a minister in such an undignified predicament. Just before they got to the brook, the minister jumped off or fell off. The pig rushed through the brook like mad and up through the woods. Marilla and I run down and helped the minister get up and brush his coat. He wasn't hurt, but he was mad. He seemed to hold Marilla and me responsible for it all, though we told him the pig didn't belong to us and had been pestering us all summer. Besides, what did he come to the back door for? You'd never have caught Mr. Allen doing that. It'll be a long time before we get a man like Mr. Allen, but it's an ill wind that blows no good. We've never seen hoof or hair of that pig since, and it's my belief we never will. Things is pretty quiet in Avonlea. I don't find Green Gables as lonesome as I expected. I think I'll start another cotton warp quilt this winter, Mrs. Silas Sloane has a handsome new apple leaf pattern when I feel that I must have some excitement. I read the murder trials in that Boston paper my niece sends me. I never used to do it, but they're real interesting. The States must be an awful place. I hope you'll never go there, but the way girls roam over the earth now is something terrible. It always makes me think of Satan in the book of Job, going to and fro and walking up and down. I don't believe the Lord ever intended it, that's what. Davy has been pretty good since you went away. One day he was bad and Marilla punished him by making him wear Dora's apron all day. And then he went and cut all Dora's aprons up. I spanked him for that, and then he went and chased my rooster to death. The McPhersons have moved down to my place. She's a great housekeeper and very particular. She's rooted all my June lilac up because she says they make a garden look so untidy. Thomas set them lilac out when we were married. Her husband seems a nice sort of a man, but she can't get over being an old maid. That's what? Don't study too hard, and be sure and put your winter underclothes on as soon as the weather gets cool. Marilla worries a lot about you, but I tell her you've got a lot more sense than I ever thought you would have at one time, and that you'll be all right. Davy's letter plunged into a grievance at the start. Dear Anne, please write and tell Marilla not to tie me to the rail of the bridge when I go fishing. The boys make fun of me when she does. It's awful lonesome here without you, but great fun in school. Jane Andrews is crosser than you. I scared Mrs. Lynde with a jack-o'-lantern last night. She was awful mad, and she was mad 'cause I chased her old rooster around the yard till he fell down dead. I didn't mean to make him fall down dead. What made him die, Anne, I want to know. Mrs. Lynde threw him into the pig pen. She might have sold him to Mr. Blair. Mr. Blair is giving 50 cents apiece for good dead roosters now. I heard Mrs. Lynde asking the minister to pray for her. What did she do that was so bad, and I want to know. I've got a kite with a magnificent tail, Anne. Milty Boulter told me a great story in school yesterday. It is true, old Joe Mosey and Leon were playing cards one night last week in the woods. The cards were on a stump, and a big black man bigger than the trees come along and grabbed the cards and the stump and disapered with a noise like thunder. I'll bet they were scared. Milty says the black man was the old Harry. Was he? And I want to know, Mr. Kimball over at Spencervale is very sick and will have to go to the hospital. Please excuse me while I ask Marilla if that's spelled right. Marilla says it's the asylum he has to go to, not the other place. He thinks he has a snake inside of him. What's it like to have a snake inside of you, Anne? I want to know, Mrs. Lawrence. Belle is sick too. Mrs. Lynde says that all that is the matter with her is that she thinks too much about her insides. I wonder, said Anne as she folded up her letters, what Mrs. Lynde would think of Philippa. Chapter 6. In the park. What are you going to do with yourselves today, girls? Asked Philippa, popping into Anne's room one Saturday afternoon. We are going for a walk in the park, answered Anne. I ought to stay in and finish my blouse, but I couldn't sew on a day like this. There's something in the air that gets into my blood and makes a sort of glory in my soul. My fingers would twitch and I'd sew a crooked seam. So it's ho for the park and the pines. Does we include anyone but yourself and Priscilla? Yes, it includes Gilbert and Charlie, and we'll be very glad if it will include you also. But, said Philippa dolefully, if I go I'll have to be Gooseberry, and that will be a new experience for Philippa Gordon. Well, new experiences are broadening. Come along and you'll be able to sympathize with all poor souls who have to play Gooseberry often. But where are all the victims? Oh, I was tired of them all and simply couldn't be bothered with any of them today. Besides, I've been feeling a little blue, just a pale, elusive azure. It isn't serious enough for anything darker. I wrote Alec and Alonzo last week. I put the letters into envelopes and addressed them, but I didn't seal them up. That evening something funny happened. That is, Alec would think it funny, but Alonzo wouldn't be likely to. I was in a hurry, so I snatched Alec's letter as I thought out of the envelope and scribbled down a postscript. Then I mailed both letters. I got Alonzo's reply this morning. Girls, I had put that postscript to his letter and he was furious. Of course he'll get over it, and I don't care if he doesn't, but it spoiled my day. So I thought I'd come to you darlings to get cheered up. After the football season opens, I won't have any spare Saturday afternoons. I adore football. I've got the most gorgeous cap and sweater striped in Redmond colors to wear to the games. To be sure, a little way off I'll look like a walking barber's pole. Do you know that Gilbert of yours has been elected captain of the freshmen football team? Yes, he told us so last evening, said Priscilla, seeing that outraged Anne would not answer. He and Charlie were down. We knew they were coming, so we painstakingly put out of sight or out of reach all Miss Ada's cushions. That very elaborate one with the raised embroidery I dropped on the floor in the corner behind the chair it was on. I thought it would be safe there. But would you believe it? Charlie Sloane made for that chair, noticed the cushion behind it, solemnly fished it up, and sat on it the whole evening. Such a wreck of a cushion as it was. Poor Miss Ada asked me today, still smiling, but oh, so reproachfully, why I had allowed it to be sat upon. I told her I hadn't, that it was a matter of predestination coupled with inveterate Sloanishness, and I wasn't a match for both combined. Miss Ada's cushions are really getting on my nerves, said Anne. She finished 2 new ones last week, stuffed and embroidered within an inch of their lives. There being absolutely no other cushionless place to put them, she stood them up against the wall on the stair landing. They topple over half the time, and if we come up or down the stairs in the dark, we fall over them. Last Sunday, when Dr. Davis prayed for all those exposed to the perils of the sea, I added in thought, and for all those who live in houses where cushions are loved not wisely but too well. There, we're ready, and I see the boys coming. Through Old St. John's, do you cast in your lot with us, Phil? I'll go if I can walk with Priscilla and Charlie. That will be a bearable degree of gooseberry. That Gilbert of yours is a darling, Anne, but why does he go around so much with goggle eyes? Anne stiffened. She had no great liking for Charlie Sloane, but he was of Avonlea, so no outsider had any business to laugh at him. Charlie and Gilbert have always been friends, she said coldly. Charlie is a nice boy. He's not to blame for his eyes. Don't tell me that. He is. He must have done something dreadful in a previous existence to be punished with such eyes. Price and I are going to have such sport with him this afternoon. We'll make fun of him to his face, and he'll never know it. Doubtless, The abandoned peas, as Anne called them, did carry out their amiable intentions. But Sloane was blissfully ignorant. He thought he was quite a fine fellow to be walking with two such co-eds, especially Philippa Gordon, the class beauty, and Belle. It must surely impress Anne. She would see that some people appreciated him at his real value. Gilbert and Anne loitered a little behind the others, enjoying the calm, still beauty of the autumn afternoon under the pines of the park, on the road that climbed and twisted round the harbor shore. "The silence here is like a prayer, isn't it?" said Anne, her face upturned to the shining sky. "How I love the pines. They seem to strike their roots deep into the romance of all the ages. It is so comforting to creep away now and then for a good talk with them. I always feel so happy out here." And so in mountain solitudes overtaken as by some spell divine, "Their cares drop from them like the needles shaken from out the gusty pine," quoted Gilbert. "They make our little ambitions seem rather petty, don't they, Anne?" "I think if ever any great sorrow came to me, I would come to the pines for comfort," said Anne dreamily. "I hope no great sorrow ever will come to you, Anne," said Gilbert, who could not connect the idea of sorrow with the vivid, joyous creature beside him, unwitting that those who can soar to the highest heights can also plunge to the deepest depths, and that the natures which enjoy most keenly are those which also suffer most sharply. "But there must some time," mused Anne. "Life seems like a cup of glory held to my lips just now. But there must be some bitterness in it. There is in every cup. I shall taste mine some day. Well, I hope I shall be strong and brave to meet it. And I hope it won't be through my own fault that it will come. Do you remember what Dr. Davis said last Sunday evening, that the sorrows God sent us brought comfort and strength with them, while the sorrows we brought on ourselves, through folly or wickedness, were by far the hardest to bear? But we mustn't talk of sorrow on an afternoon like this. It's meant for the sheer joy of living, isn't it? If I had my way, I'd shut everything out of your life but happiness and pleasure, Anne," said Gilbert in the tone that meant danger ahead. "Then you would be very unwise," rejoined Anne hastily. "I'm sure no life can be properly developed and rounded out without some trial and sorrow, though I suppose it is only when we are pretty comfortable that we admit it. Come, the others have got to the pavilion and are beckoning to us." They all sat down in the little pavilion to watch an autumn sunset of deep red fire and pallid gold. To their left lay Kingsport, its roofs and spires dim in their shroud of violet smoke. To their right lay the harbor, taking on tints of rose and copper as it stretched out into the sunset. Before them the water shimmered, satin smooth and silver gray, and beyond, clean-shaven William's Island loomed out of the mist, guarding the town like a sturdy bulldog. Its lighthouse beacon flared through the mist like a baleful star, and was answered by another in the far horizon. "Did you ever see such a strong-looking place?" asked Philippa. "I don't want William's Island especially, but I'm sure I couldn't get it if I did. Look at that sentry on the summit of the fort, right beside the flag. Doesn't he look as if he had stepped out of a romance?" "Speaking of romance," said Priscilla, "we've been looking for heather, but, of course, we couldn't find any." "It's too late in the season, I suppose. Heather," exclaimed Anne. "Heather doesn't grow in America, does it?" "There are just 2 patches of it in the whole continent," said Phil, "one right here in the park and one somewhere else in Nova Scotia, I forget where. The famous Highland Regiment, the Black Watch, camped here one year, and when the men shook out the straw of their beds in the spring, some seeds of heather took root. Oh, how delightful," said enchanted Anne. "Let's go home around." "By Spofford Avenue," suggested Gilbert. "We can see all the handsome houses where the wealthy nobles dwell. Spofford Avenue is the finest residential street in Kingsport. Nobody can build on it unless he's a millionaire." "Oh, do," said Phil. "There's a perfectly killing little place I want to show you. And it wasn't built by a millionaire. It's the first place after you leave the park, and must have grown while Spofford Avenue was still a country road. It did grow, it wasn't built. I don't care for the houses on the avenue. They're too brand new and Plotteglassy. But this little spot is a dream, and its name, but wait till you see it." They saw it as they walked up the pine-fringed hill from the park. Just on the crest where Spofford Avenue petered out into a plain road was a little white frame house with groups of pines on either side of it, stretching their arms protectingly over its low roof. It was covered with red and gold vines, through which its green-shuttered windows peeped. Before it was a tiny garden surrounded by a low stone wall. October though it was, the garden was still very sweet with dear, old-fashioned, unworldly flowers and shrubs, sweet may, southernwood, lemon verbena, alyssum, petunias, marigolds, and chrysanthemums. A tiny brick wall in herringbone pattern led from the gate to the front porch. The whole place might have been transplanted from some remote country village. Yet there was something about it that made its nearest neighbor, the big lawn-encircled palace of a tobacco king, look exceedingly crude and showy and ill-bred by contrast. As Phil said, it was the difference between being born and being made. "It's the dearest place I ever saw," said Anne delightedly. "It gives me one of my old delightful funny aches. It's dearer and quainter than even Miss Lavendar's stone house." "It's the name I want you to notice especially," said Phil. "Look in white letters around the archway over the gate. Patty's Place, isn't that killing? Especially on this avenue of pinehursts and elmwolds and cedarcrofts." "Patty's Place, if you please. I adore it." "Have you any idea who Patty is?" asked Priscilla. "Patty Spofford is the name of the old lady who owns it, I've discovered. She lives there with her niece, and they've lived there for hundreds of years, more or less, maybe a little less, and exaggeration is merely a flight of poetic fancy. I understand that wealthy folk have tried to buy the lot time and again. It's really worth a small fortune now, but Patty won't sell upon any consideration. And there's an apple orchard behind the house in place of a backyard. You'll see it when we get a little past a real apple orchard on Spofford Avenue." "I'm going to dream about Patty's Place tonight," said Anne. "Why?" "I feel as if I belonged to it. I wonder if, by any chance, we'll ever see the inside of it." "It isn't likely," said Priscilla, and smiled mysteriously. "No, it isn't likely. But I believe it will happen. I have a queer, creepy, crawly feeling. You can call it a presentiment, if you like that. Patty's Place and I are going to be better acquainted yet." As Anne's journey unfolds through letters and quiet reflections, her world grows richer in ways she never imagined. Subscribe and join us daily for more chapters only on Driven to Win.